Hi Goose Hunters, I'm Sean Mann. I'm here to show you how to operate the Shorty and the Sweet Talker, our two short Reed Goose calls. These calls sound a little bit different from each other, but they're operated in exactly the same manner. The Shorty can be a little snappier, a little sharper on the top end. And the Sweet Talker is a little bit smoother, a little bit lower pitched on the end. Just a little bit smoother. The first thing I'd like to talk about with operating these calls is air delivery. So many different guys making calls these days, so many different approaches to how to operate a call, and there's no book you can open up and say, oh, grunt, that means this, or you know, back pressure, what does that mean? So I'm going to try to help clarify some of those terms, try to make it a little bit easier for you to operate these calls, and try to do it in such a way that you're not working too hard when you're using the calls. The first step is, how do you hold the call in your hand? And that's simple. I hold the call right between my thumb and my index finger, right here in the flesh of the hand. But I like to do it in such a way that I'm calling straight out of my hand. I see some guys calling or holding a call like this, and the truth is, if you want to use any fingers to put back pressure, which is creating pressure back into the call with the side of your hand, it's not as effective this way as it is if you are calling straight down the length of your hand and you have now 4 fingers in play instead of 2. So hold the call so that you're calling straight down your hand. For the most part, I'm a one-handed caller. I'll have my call in my left hand, flag in my right hand. I like to use them interchangeably. But when I do call two-handed, it would be to get a little more depth into the sound of the call, to get those deeper moans and sounds like that. When I'm using two hands, I like to put the point of this hand, the point right here, into this line on my offhand, on my right hand. So I put the hand together like that. And that enables me to have kind of 2 flippers in motion. One, I can open this way, I can open this way, or I can completely close this hand and completely close this hand, which creates a big cup to make that sound bigger. So, but for the most part, I'm going to show you things with one hand. The next step is, how do we put air into the call, or how do we put the air through the call? The call has a reed in it. We have to make that reed move. We have to make it move in 2 pitches to make a honk, a low pitch and a high pitch. There are a number of ways to do that, and I want to try to teach you what I think is the most efficient way. There are a number of techniques that are being taught today. Some utilize your voice. People call that grunting, where you would hum and push air through the call. Others where you just blow air through the call. So you blow one pressure and increase that pressure to break the call over. And I use a little bit different approach to both of those. I utilize my tongue to create all of the pitch variations in the call. And if you can whistle through your lips, you can easily learn this technique. For example, simple whistle, If you raise and lower your tongue while you're whistling, you'll notice that it changes pitch. That is the basis of the technique that I'm going to teach you. Essentially, we're going to use the tip of our tongue to allow air into the call, and we're also going to use the tip of the tongue to stop air into the call. So it's a little pressure gate. Many of the other techniques would utilize the back of your throat or your abdomen to try to actually start and stop air pressure. In this technique, you can actually always have air pressure ready to exhale, but just use the tip of your tongue to start and stop it. So, and that would be how we would make a honk. So first, let's put a little air into the call and see what it does. I'm simply going, dropping the tongue from behind my top teeth to make the call break into the higher part of the honk. I'm going to bring the tongue back up, not adding a lot of air pressure, but just bringing the tongue up and keeping that air pressure strong. So when you bring your tongue up, it makes the airway smaller, and the same amount of air pressure through a smaller airway naturally increases pressure. So it would now sound like, if I did it whistling, now that's a simple honk. And the honk is the #1 note that you have to learn for a number of reasons. Everything a goose does is a honk or a part of a honk. The honk is the first and most important note to learn with a goose call for a very simple reason. Everything a Canada goose does is either a honk or a part of a honk. So, the honk, the cluck is a shortened version. The cries are either a short beginning and long ending. The moans are simply the ending. So everything we do with a Canada goose call is obviously based on the honk. So again, we make the honk by exhaling as if we were going to whistle, drop the tongue from behind the top teeth down to make the low part, and then bring the tongue back up while continuing to push to make the high half of the honk. I actually make a T sound when I drop my tongue and a T sound when I bring it back up. So it sounds like to wit, to wit, to wit. Now it's really important to understand that the speed with which you bring your tongue up dictates the pitch of the top note of the honk. So if I bring my tongue up slowly, I'll have a low note. If I bring my tongue up quickly, I have a higher pitched honk, okay? And that's all tongue speed. So tongue comes down, tongue speed dictates pitch. So a higher pitched honk, quicker tongue. Lower pitched honk, slower tongue. So just changing the speed of your tongue will give you 2 different honks. You're goose calling already. Three different tongue speeds, 3 different honks. Now that you've got the honk, let's move on to clucks. And a cluck is simply a cut down version of a honk. It's a little bit shorter on the beginning and it's shorter on the end. Cluck sounds like, and the way I make a cluck is the same principle as the honk, but my tongue only comes down for a moment. So the tongue comes down and just pushes its way right back up. So it's tut, 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 or so it's, when you get the honk technique down, you just try to shorten it up and it's going to become a cluck. Now again, tongue speed dictates pitch. So quicker tongue speed, slower tongue speed, lower pitch. At 3 different clucks, you have 3 different honks. Now, if you have those 2 combinations of honks and clucks, you can begin to mix them together. And a little tip that I'd like to give you here is that one of the things I notice that slows people down in their progress as goose callers is that they try to be too particular in how they call. They try to make a note and then make the next note and then make the next note. When you want to start to mix your notes, you have got to start to learn to slur your speech. If we're talking about talking through the call, you've got to learn to slur your speech. So when you finish your first honk, if you want to make a multiple like, you've got to learn to let your speech become sloppy, let your tongue movement become sloppy, so that as soon as you break the first note into the higher pitch, you're already resetting your tongue into the lower pitch of the next note to break it again into the higher pitch of the next note. That's just a combination of slurs. Now, we can bounce back and forth between clucks and honks really simply. Let's do an exercise. So a good practice exercise is to make a honk and a cluck, a honk and a cluck. Just to try to teach yourself to not stop the first note before you start the second. Once you're comfortable with that exercise, try to just change pitches. Do a lower medium pitched honk and a high pitched cluck. And those exercises are a little bit painful to do because they don't really sound like the goose calling scenario we want to create, but they are the things that enable you to start to weave patterns together. Different pitches of honks, different pitches of clucks. One of my favorite and most productive calling patterns is the double cluck. The double cluck is a very simple pattern to learn and a terribly effective pattern in the field. Simply a low cluck followed by a high cluck. But the slurring your notes together exercise is really important here because you have to create a rhythm that's goose-like. Your double cluck has to sound like the birds you hear double clucking. When I do it, typically like this. And it's the low cluck, high cluck. Again, the hand position is important here. And then Learn how to slur it together. And now learn how to make it sound like geese. Remember, I'm closing my hand down a bit for the low pitch, opening it to get the higher pitch. Without the hand at the end of the call, the notes would sound pretty similar. But just the addition of my hand, closing or making the end of the call longer, creates lower pitch, and then getting it out of the way makes higher pitch. And that's the double cluck. The next really important note is the cry. And the cry is a lot like a honk, a lot like a cluck. It has kind of a short beginning, but it has a stretched out second half. So cries can sound like or now, the cry is important in a lot of different situations. It can be used as a comeback call, and it can be used as a confidence call. To make the cry, you simply begin a honk, break it over, and stretch out the second half. So the tongue movement is if you want to use the cry as a comeback call, try to make it raise a little bit and pitch at the end. If you want to use it as a confidence call, try to make it drop in pitch at the end. Now, the moan is a confidence call. It's a big sounding call. It's a two-handed call. It's one of the few notes I'll do actually needing two hands on the call. It sounds like this. And as big as that note sounds, and as tricky as it sounds, it's really a simple, simple note to make. The air pressure that I use for the moan is just blowing a little bit of air. It's that simple. As you put the call to your mouth and just blow a little air. That's the note. It doesn't break there, and I'm not looking to make a honk. I'm just blowing a little air in. Put the call between your thumb and your index finger, as we showed, and again, blow straight down your hand. You want to curl your fingers around the call, and this is what a lot of people would refer to as back pressure. Back pressure the call. You hear it flip over there? I'm using my hand to make that note flip. And it sounds terrible when you do it with one hand, but when you put the point of this hand to the line here, creating a nice cup, it actually turns that note into a goose. If it bogs down a little bit like I just did, just let a little bit of this back pressure off. It just means you're choking the call down a little bit too much. So if you get that note, just roll your fingers back a tiny bit. You can use that in a lot of situations. If you're in a small field where birds can sneak up over trees, you may not want to blow a loud honk at them right away. The first note you might blow to them would be a moan. It's a real soft, it's not as percussive sounding as a honk, a loud honk, and it sounds so vocal. A lot of times those birds will break the tree line and you hit them with that and they just lock their wings and sail right in. But it's also a great confidence note for finishing spooky birds. At the end of calling You got the bird's attention, they're coming to you, and you just want to sweeten the deal a little bit with some nice notes. That moan will really help them put the landing gear down. Now, I want to start to put some of these notes together. We've taught them individually, we've mixed a couple, but the moan can be used with a cluck and moan type combination. And again, we're going to learn to slur notes together here. But make your moan, cup the hands, bring your other hand up. Real simple note. It's just a moan, and I open my hand a little bit and bring my tongue up to make a cluck, and right back down into the moan. So when you see my finger come up, I'm bringing my tongue up too. So they're working together. You can open your hand all the way. You can use it as a confidence pattern. You can use it as a comeback pattern. It's a mixture of the moan and a cluck. Practice that, practice slurring it together, and practice changing the pitch of it from low moans for the confidence work to higher pitched, more pleading moans for comeback work. We've covered some basic notes, and I want to show you how they fit into the hunting scenario. The honks, the loudest notes, are what we use to get the attention of birds off in the distance. We'll honk loud and clear. Sometimes we'll use cries to get the attention of birds that aren't paying attention to us. But once we get the attention of birds and they start to come to us, we want to start to make flock sounds, and that's where we'll start to mix our honk pitches and mix clucks in. As the birds get closer, we start to go to some of the cries and moans for confidence work. And then of course, if you lose the birds, you go to your cries, your pleading sounding cries to get the birds back in. And then finally some sweet work, some nice soft clucks and some moans to finish the birds off. So I'll just run quickly through a hunting scenario from honks to moans with everything in between. Now that we've covered a basic hunting scenario, I want to talk about a couple variations on the notes themselves. I want to talk about first the buzzed honk. And that's a honk that we create with a raspy bottom sound from the reed itself. We're not using our voice yet. We're not grunting into the call, but the honk would sound like the original honk I taught was clear. But you'll notice the difference in the sounds of these two notes. The buzzed honk has a brighter top end or high note and a raspier, fuller bottom note. It can be heard farther away, and it has kind of a fatter, goosier sound. They're great to mix back and forth. The raspy, then the clear. To make this raspy honk, you use the same tongue motion as you do for a clear honk, but just drag the tongue on its way down. So just when you start it, instead of making t, 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 go tss, 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 and it'll give you a raspy beginning. So clear and raspy. Okay, when you feel that raspiness, you'll feel resistance from the reed. You just push against that and bring your tongue up to make the high pitch of the honk. The clear honk actually doesn't have as high pitch at the ending as the raspy honk. And learn to mix them back and forth in the same way as you learned to slur notes back and forth earlier. Another variation of air delivery is putting your voice into the call. Some people call it grunting. It's really humming with your throat, and you hum with the call to your mouth until you make the reed move. So it would sound like I'm just going. I'm not blowing air through the call. I'm just making that vibration from my throat affect the reed and make the reed move and make the reed raspy. And that also gives you a raspy sounding honk. And notice it has kind of a lower character. So you can add your voice, you can use your tongue to make the call raspy, or you can blow the call clear. So 3 different variations of the honk would be clear, raspy with the tongue, and raspy with your throat. You can mix all those together. And now you have 3 variations of a basic honk. Again, there's so many combinations now becoming available that it's hard to illustrate all of them in one calling scenario. So you have your clear sound, raspy with your tongue, and raspy from the throat. Now, utilizing the throat, humming or grunting, is great for groundwork, for low-end work, for finish work. A lot of guys like to really make the call sound big, sound like the big gander, by using a little bit of voice into the call. And again, you're going to hum. Another 2-handed note. Cup the call. Takes very little air pressure to make this note, but I'm going to start the note with my voice and then just flip my tongue up quickly to make the different second halves of the note. If you bring it up softly, you get a nice big goose. And that's just using the voice for some groundwork. So as you can see, there are a lot of different ways to get good and different sounds out of the calls. The most important thing is to learn a basic honk. And once you have a basic honk, it's playtime. Put air through this call any way you can imagine. Try it with your voice, try it without your voice, try it with your tongue, try it by keeping your tongue down. Once you can make the reed break from low to high, try every imaginable way to put air through the call that you can think of. The more time you spend with this call to your mouth, the better you're going to get with it. The better you get with it, the more fun you're going to have in the field. Thank you.